Somewhere along the shores of Lake Victoria, in the land now called Kenya, there lies a stone. Not just any stone. People travel hundreds of miles to stand before it. They whisper prayers to it. They leave offerings at its feet. Old men weep when they see it. Warriors bow their heads in silence because they say that stone was once a man whose skin was made of rock. A warrior so terrifying that entire armies turned and fled the moment they heard his name. A man who walked through spears like they were raindrops. A man who tore through battalions alone. And yet, this man, this unstoppable, unbreakable, walking mountain of a warrior, was brought down, not by a sword, not by an army, not by a god. He was brought down by something far older, far more dangerous, and far more cunning than any weapon ever forged. He was brought down by a shadow. Pause. This is his story, and once you hear it, you will never forget it. The year is 1720. In the Sidho clan of Kano, on the shores of the Great Lake Victoria, a woman named Nyabera was fighting the hardest battle of her life, bringing a child into the world. Outside the hut, her husband Abonio Ward Omelo paced the red earth, listening to the cries from within. The elders sat in silence. The night was heavy. The air smelled of rain. And so it was. When the baby entered the world that night, screaming with a voice like cracking thunder, his mother, Nyabera, left it. She died in childbirth. The very night she gave the world its greatest warrior, she was taken from it. The boy was given to his grandmother Rapondi, who held him against her chest and looked into his wide, dark eyes. They named him Luanda Magere. Luanda, meaning rock. Magere, meaning the fierce one. Or some say, the one on which we shall build, the fierce rock. Even his name sounded like a weapon. He was not yet a year old when his father, Abonio, rode out to battle the Nandi, the Luo's most feared enemy, and never came back. Within the first years of his life, Magere had already lost both parents to the war that would define him. His grandmother raised him on stories of battles and honor. She fed him on loss and shaped him with it. And when the boy grew, he grew like the rock he was named for, slowly, silently, and impossibly strong. By the time Luanda Magere was a young man, the war between the Luo and the Nandi had become something personal. The Nandi were fierce fighters, expert warriors who owned the night, who struck before dawn when the world was still half asleep, when your eyes hadn't adjusted and your spear arm was slow. And they had been winning. Again and again, the Luo had been pushed back, bloodied, humiliated, villages burned, cattle stolen, people taken. But on this particular afternoon, something was different. Because on this particular afternoon, a young warrior named Magere stepped onto the battlefield for the first time. The battle began. The Nandi poured across the field like a river breaking its banks, hundreds of them, screaming war cries, their spears catching the afternoon sun. The Luo held, just barely. Men fell on both sides, blood on red earth. And then Magere walked forward, not ran, walked. A Nandi warrior saw him and hurled a spear, perfectly aimed, perfectly thrown. The spear connected with Magere's chest. It shattered, splinters flying like broken glass. Magere didn't even flinch. The battlefield went quiet. Both sides, Luo and Nandi alike. Everyone stopped, because what they had just witnessed was not possible. Another spear, same result, bounced off his chest like a stick thrown at a granite cliff. An arrow, deflected. A war club, shattered on impact with his arm. And then Magere moved. He moved through the Nandi army the way a lion moves through tall grass. Effortlessly, inevitably, terrifyingly. His spear rose and fell. His roar shook the air. The Nandi ran. They ran, and they kept running, all the way back to their hills. The Luo erupted. They were screaming, crying, laughing. Some fell to their knees. Chief Owino stood absolutely still, staring at the young man who had just done the impossible. No one had an answer for what he was. Not the elders, not the medicine men, not the spirits consulted in the deep of night. Some said the gods had poured iron into his blood before birth. Some said his mother's love was so powerful it had hardened his skin as she died. Some said he was simply, quietly, not entirely human. Whatever he was, the Luo had never seen anything like him, and neither had the Nandi. The Luo had never seen anything like him, and neither had the Nandi. Word of Magere spread like fire in dry grass. Messengers carried his name across hills and valleys. Mothers whispered it to children at night, not to frighten them, but to give them hope. And the Nandi heard it too. In the way you hear news, you desperately don't want to believe. The pattern became legend. The Nandi would attack the Luo, often at night, in their preferred style. The Luo would hold. Then the calm would break. Magere would appear. He would not rush. He would set down his pipe slowly. He would stand, and the earth seemed to exhale under him. He would take his spear and his shield, and he would walk to the battlefield. The moment the Nandi saw him, the calculation changed entirely. It didn't matter how many of them there were, because numbers meant nothing when your weapons were useless. They would scatter like birds from a clap of thunder. Magere wouldn't stop at the border. He would follow them all the way to their homes, and he would take their cattle, their most sacred possession, the measure of wealth and pride, and he would walk them back to Kano in broad daylight, unhurried, unafraid. Because who was going to stop him? The fire crackled. The elders leaned in close. A plan was forming in the dark. Her name was Chebet. She was said to be the most beautiful woman in all of Nandi, a woman whose beauty could make warriors forget their own names. The Nandi elders sat with her for 3 days, and when she emerged from those meetings, her face was like stone. Her eyes, however, burned. The Nandi approached the Luo under a flag of peace. They came with gifts, cattle, honey, grain, and a proposition. They wished to end the conflict. As a gesture of goodwill, they would offer their most beautiful daughter in marriage to the great Luanda Magere. The Luo elders were immediately suspicious. Magere looked at Chebet across the gathering. She met his gaze and held it, unafraid, calm, almost challenging. Something moved in him. The great rock, unmoved by spears, unmoved by armies, stirred. And so the man who could not be pierced by iron opened his door willingly to the one weapon that could destroy him. Months passed. Chebet lived in Magere's home. She cooked his food. She learned his habits. She studied him with the patience of someone who was playing a very long, very dangerous game. Magere's first wife, a Luo woman named Enyango, was his true companion, the one who nursed him when he was sick, who knew his moods like the weather. But Enyango was away one afternoon when Magere fell ill. Even rocks, it turns out, can sweat. Chebet came to him with a clay gourd. She knelt beside him. Her hands were completely steady. Magere's eyes were half closed, his voice low. She cuts the shadow. She cuts my shadow with the knife and places the medicine there. Chebet blinked. She had heard him correctly. She was certain of it. She looked down at his shadow on the earthen floor, a long dark shape, stretching in the afternoon light that cut through the doorway. Her hand tightened on the knife. Carefully, very, very carefully, she drew it across the shadow. The shadow bled. Dark red seeping into the earth from the shadow's edge. Real. Visceral. Impossible. Chebet did not scream. She did not cry. She applied the medicine. She helped Magere until he slept. And then she sat in the corner of the hut for a long time in the growing dark, thinking. That night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds and the village breathed the slow breath of sleep, Chebet rose from her mat. She did not take anything with her. She did not leave a message. She simply walked through the darkness, away from Magere's home, away from Kano, away from the life she had built, and back toward her people. She ran the whole night. When Chebet arrived at the Nandi settlement before dawn, barely able to speak from running all night, the guards brought her to the chief immediately. The elders assembled in minutes. They had been waiting years for this moment, though none of them had dared to hope it would actually come. I know how to kill him. The room went absolutely still. His body cannot be wounded. His skin is truly stone. I have seen it, but his shadow is flesh. It bleeds. It feels. You must target the shadow, not the man. The shadow. The plan was as elegant as it was ruthless. They would use the one thing the Luo would never expect, the protection of kinship. Magere had married a Nandi woman. They were, by the customs of both peoples, now family. The Luo would not expect a night attack from family. They would strike at night, draw him out into the open when morning came. And then, one warrior, one spear, one shadow. They came in the dead of night. Hundreds of Nandi warriors, moving through the dark like shadows themselves. Disciplined, silent, burning with purpose. The Luo were caught off guard. Families scrambled. Children cried. Warriors grabbed spears and rushed into the dark, fighting blind. And through the chaos, through the screaming and the fire, Magere's voice boomed across the village like a war drum. He entered the battle like a force of nature, unstoppable, inevitable. The Nandi who faced him fell. Those who didn't face him ran. And slowly, painfully, inevitably, the Nandi began to retreat. The plan was failing. The night was too dark. No shadow, no weakness to exploit. Magere was winning. Again, the sun began to rise. The first pale light of morning crept across the battlefield, and on the red earth, in that long golden dawn light, Magere's shadow appeared, long and dark, and stretched out behind him as he drove the retreating Nandi back. On a small hill at the edge of the battlefield, one Nandi warrior stopped running. He turned around, and he looked down, not at Magere, at the shadow. He raised his spear. He studied the angle, the sun, the shadow. He exhaled slowly, the breath of a man about to make history. The spear left his hand. It arced through the pale morning air. Everything slowed. The spear descended. It struck, not Magere's body. It struck the shadow on the ground. Luanda Magere stopped. He looked down. Something he had never felt before. Pain. Real, devastating, impossible pain bloomed through him from the Real, devastating, impossible pain bloomed through him from the ground up. He staggered. The Luo warriors closest to him froze. They had never, in all the years and all the battles, seen Magere falter, even once. The sight of him staggering broke something in all of them, but there was nothing to protect. Because the man who had never needed protection in his life, the man whose body had turned away every weapon ever thrown at him, was on his knees. And then the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. The Luo around him stepped back, eyes wide, as something extraordinary began to happen. Magere's body, his arms, his chest, his face began to harden, to grey, to solidify. The flesh of the greatest warrior who had ever walked those plains turned slowly, inexorably, into stone. His last words, his voice fading like wind. "Tell them, I did not fall. I became what I always was." And then he was stone. The battle stopped. Both sides, Nandi and Luo, standing in the early morning light, looking at the boulder that had, moments before, been the most feared warrior in East Africa. The Luo wept. Some tore their garments. Some simply sat down on the battlefield and could not move. A strong wind swept across Kano. Dark clouds gathered where there had been clear sky. And for 2 years after that day, 2 full years, the region suffered a devastating drought. As if the earth itself was in mourning, they searched for him for 2 years. The Luo elders consulted the spirits, sent men in every direction. And then, Luanda Magere appeared to the old men in their dreams. He told them where to find him. In a dense bush, a few meters from the river Nyando, they found it, a stone, brownish, partially sunk into the earth. It looked, to those who knew his face, like the top of a man's head. Today, that stone sits in a small hut surrounded by ancient indigenous trees along the Nyando River, in what is now Kisumu County, Kenya. The hut is attended by a caretaker, a direct descendant of Luanda Magere himself, who tells the story to visitors. Hundreds of people come every month. They bring offerings. They pray. Warriors and politicians and students and grandmothers and small children, all of them standing before a rock and feeling, somehow, that they are standing before something still alive, because in a way he is. At the site, they have placed his traditional war weapons, a spear and a shield. His old smoking pipe rests beneath an ancient tree. Every element of the man preserved, waiting. So what do we take from the story of Luanda Magere? Some people hear it as a warning about women, about outsiders, about trusting too easily. And yes, those warnings are there. But I think the deepest lesson of Luanda Magere is this. Every great thing has a shadow. Every strength walks alongside a vulnerability. The same sun that makes you powerful enough to cast that shadow is the same sun that reveals it, and the world will always find your shadow, eventually, not through strength, through patience, through closeness, through the thing you let inside your walls. Luanda Magere was betrayed not because he was weak. He was betrayed because he was human. Because in the end, even a man made of rock needs someone to bring him medicine when he is sick. Even the fierce rock needed warmth, and the Nandi knew that. They didn't try to break the rock. They found the man inside it. Luanda Magere, lived and died on the shores of Lake Victoria more than 300 years ago. But his name is still spoken. His stone is still visited. His story is still told, father to son, grandmother to grandchild, in the Luo language, in the firelight, just as it has always been told. Some men leave statues when they die. Some men leave books. Some men leave borders drawn on maps. Luanda Magere left a stone. And 300 years later, people still travel to put their hands on it. That, my friend, is a legacy carved from something harder than iron. That was the legend of Luanda Magere, the fierce rock of the Luo people, one of Africa's most extraordinary warrior stories, and one that the world does not know nearly enough about. If this story moved you, if it made you proud or curious, or simply amazed that this is real history from real people on this real continent, then this channel is for you. Because Africa is full of stories like this. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, and most of the world has never heard a single one. We're going to change that, one legend at a time. Hit subscribe if this is the channel you've been waiting for. Drop the name of an African legend you want us to cover in the comments below. And share this video, because every view is a vote for African history being told by Africans for the world. I'll see you in the next legend. Until then, remember the rock.